and they're displaying this internalized sexism, because if we don't nip it in the bud now, they turn into Donald Trump. Ooh, I don't know.
That's very true.
It does work. It's more nuanced in that way. Like teenagers, you can be a little more laissez-faire, but checking in grown men is something I'm still learning, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more difficult because at that point, it's
The area was going to be women in the workplace, which you guys kind of already segued into in a lot of your responses. I think that it's important that you noted the style of dress and how you are perceived, because it's not necessarily out of a code of conduct type of situation, because you could be dressed extremely appropriately, and at the end of the day, there are men who will approach you in an inappropriate way. There are men who will approach you in an inappropriate way as a young woman in a professional career if you're wearing pants. So it has always been very interesting to me, and it's in many ways offensive, when someone approaches you about your skirt or approaches you about your dress, as in you're supposed to only wear baggy clothes, or you're supposed to not wear makeup, or your hair is supposed to be a different kind of way in order for you not to get looked at by men. For you not to get looked at by men, you have to be in a global society where there are no men.
right.
Instead of actually approaching males and telling them how to react to women in the workplace, what women in the workplace do, as well as men in management, is try to recreate the wheel for women. Not only does that diminish a lot of women, particularly those who are early entering into their careers, but it also makes them less likely to report instances of negative behaviors by men. Because they automatically know if you're addressing them as the person who's the reason why this is happening, off the bat, you're not going to support me if I come to you when this man approaches me in the wrong way, when this man says something that's wrong, when this man touches me in the wrong way, when this man makes me feel uncomfortable. And it happens in our society, and it happens in our workforces every day.
I think if we're talking about women in the workplace, we also need to talk about behavior and our diminished ability to be proactive. Sheryl Sandberg wrote a book a few years ago called Lean In, and she talked about the need for professional women to be proactive about their careers, to put themselves out there, which is not bad advice. But the problem is that Black women have this burden of being angry and aggressive and emasculating, burdened by that stereotype. So when we lean in, people perceive it much differently. Latina women, same stereotype, spicy Latina. So, when Black women and Latina women lean in, we're perceived quite differently. So I interviewed, when I was writing my book last year, I interviewed a bunch of Black women, and a lot of them said they find themselves being extra obsequious in the workplace, like extra happy and extra, because they don't want people to see them as being angry. And one woman told me this story where she was talking to her supervisor, and her supervisor was telling her something that wasn't great, and her supervisor kept saying, "Don't get angry. I'm not angry. Don't get angry. I'm not angry. Don't get angry." So there's just this perception that we are going to be extra, that we're going to be extra dominant, and that hampers our ability to do what we need to do, because sometimes you need to tell people something in the workplace. Sometimes you need to fight for yourself and your team in the workplace, but we're hampered in being able to do that.
I think you're 100% correct, and this actually happened to me a few weeks ago, and we were having an interesting conversation about some policy issues that had gone wrong, and one of the comments from a supervisor was, "Oh, do you feel like throwing a drink at me?" And I sat there like, first and foremost, I've never thrown a drink at anybody in my entire life.
That's alcohol abuse.
Beyond that, I've watched way too many episodes of Real Housewives of Atlanta to think that that's going to happen up in here.
Right.
This was the same person who questioned my salary negotiation for the job that I took, because he said that there had never been a woman who came in negotiating their salary. It's very, very, very interesting. And the numbers play out. Less than 1% of the female population, regardless of race, negotiate salaries when they take a job. Regardless of how much educational experience they have, the majority of women do not feel strong enough or worthy enough or capable to sit at a table and have that argument and have that discussion. And as long as that exists, you will always be underpaid. always be devalued. Before moving on from women in the workplace, because I think that's a very vital topic, how is it that you all feel, and anybody can answer this, you have overcome a lot of the areas of discrimination that existed where you work? Or how do you work through those issues?
I would just say, generally speaking, being a double minority, you gotta work twice as hard and produce twice as much. So I've internalized that, and it plays out in my work. And oftentimes becomes a source of frustration when you weigh up one work product up against another and see the way that they're received and applauded and judged and graded in the workplace, right? Still work my tushy off, and but I think that's just a very simple sort of distilled way to package that answer. Yeah.
I developed thick skin over the years dealing with discrimination, and I also took advantage of having mentors in every workplace that I had. My voice is sorry. So sometimes it's hard to go through, a hostile work environment when you're the only woman in the position or in the company, period. So luckily, I always had a woman in the workplace that I kind of connected with, and they told me their issues and how they overcame that. So I listened to their testimonies, and I learned from their past circumstances in order for me to just move forward. So I think developing a mentor, finding someone that's a little bit older who's been through the game, which was much harsher back in the day than it is now, when they, grabbed asses and they fired you once you complained. So luckily, we have some workplace etiquette when it comes to that. But yeah, I just thank God for mentors.
Yeah. Yes.
So I have like a kind of different experience, or a unique experience that I've been blessed to kind of see two different vantage points. So when I first came to the mayor's office, I was 25 years old, and I thought like, oh, there's going to be these women mentors. And I read the book Lean In, and I didn't find that the women were so friendly. And actually, my mentors were kind of all male. And so my girlfriend and I started this group called Power Pump Salon 3 years ago, and we decided to meet other women like us in government or politics or any sector, any different wherever. We just wanted to expand our network and talk about our other women feeling the same thing that we're feeling. Like, how do you have conversations about salary? Like, how do you go talk to your boss about a raise? Like, I didn't know how to do that. I was like terrified, and it seemed like when we started having conversations like we are tonight, you found more women who felt like you. So you're like, okay, I'm not the only one, right? And so how do we change it? How do we change how some of these women are feeling by other women? Like, they felt they were being cut out, or there was a competition, or maybe you were the younger version coming in, and so it was, so I had kind of a different situation beginning coming in. Then I left and came back in a senior position, and I learned kind of lessons from that experience of how do I want to be as a leader. And I want people to feel like they can talk to me about those things. And I also want to coach my team. And I'm very proud of my team now. I have 3 deputy directors, 2 are African American women, 1 is a Latina. And out of the 12 positions I have, only 3 are men. And that was not intentional, but I guess kind of intentional. And so I'm very excited and proud of that because, and I'm trying to, get advice from friends of leadership, and I want to coach them on how to develop a pipeline so that we have other women that we can plug in other leadership positions. And I want to take the time to help develop them for when I was insecure so that they feel comfortable in the workplace as well, because I think that is so needed. So if you are lucky enough to have a female mentor that can help coach you through those difficult conversations, or a group of friends even that you could have your own kind of like support system. So how to have these difficult conversations about salary or sexual harassment, or you notice people who are promoted over you. There are a lot of things that I think there are still challenges, and if you don't have a good support system to kind of get you through that, then you drop off, and then you're not getting those top positions that are available to you without the coaching and guidance. So I'm happy that we're having this, like I said, conversation, and I think it's very much needed at a broader level with other women to make sure that they're looking back and bringing them with us.
I think I've also learned to pick my battles. If you address every microaggression that happens to you at work, you can't throat chop everybody who tries to touch your hair. Your career wouldn't go very far. But I think, you learn to gradually, you learn when to fight and when to let things go, and you also learn when to leave, where it's just not tenable to try to change things. So I think that's one thing you learn gradually in your career, is how to handle and how to balance all those things and how to pick your battles.
Two introductions. First off, welcome Donna Black Miller. We actually have a okay. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Polished Pebbles, Ms. Kelly Fair. Kelly runs an amazing organization that helps to mentor and coach young women into their ultimate capacity, not only throughout high school, but also so that they'll know what's available to them through and post-college and have a better sense of self. Women in the workplace. The next segment is violence against women. So one of the major pieces of legislation that has come out over the past decade is the VAWA Act. And the Violence Against Women Act aims to look at what goes on, not only on college campuses, but also in the workplace, where women have been acted towards aggressively. That can be physically, it can also be mental anguish, and things that are verbally said over time. In the majority of cases, these instances, aside from physical aggression, are extremely hard to prove, specifically on college campuses. Because it turns out to be a he said, she said, and in our society, men's voices tend to take a little bit higher than women's. In addition, in the majority of those cases, the person who is assigned the office that handles this on college campuses is typically one that is led by all men. It is one that is staffed by all men. It is one in which the parents of the students who are accused are typically not even called after these accusations occur, and they're not involved. It is also one in which, for the most part, there's rarely a lawyer present. At the City Colleges of Chicago, the previous administrator for this program, while he was doing his public affairs rallies about how VAWA was supposed to be rolled out on campus, things that guys weren't supposed to do on campus, the levels at which women could report, did this for a good year and a half, he got fired. He got fired for sexually assaulting 6 women. So when you're talking about how this process actually works, you also have to look at who's handling it. Look at why these offices are made up to look like the people who are actually committing the crimes. What level of comfortability would women have on that campus knowing that a lot of their classmates were actually sexually harassed by this man? And how many other women were sexually harassed by this man whose names will never be known and whose cases would never get counted? The Violence Against Women Act is extremely important, and it's extremely important for a few reasons. First and foremost, because it allows women to have a voice. But beyond that, it segments different categories for what sexual violence is. The majority of men in this country, if you were to poll them, sexual violence is something physical. Aside from physical rape, they do not count anything leading up to that as sexual violence. So I can harass you as much as I want. I can go by and say things about your skirt, I can touch you. As long as I'm not physically raping you, it doesn't count. This is men at the executive level. This is the man who's out here street cleaning. These are teens in high schools across this country. So when people argue and get up in arms about the comments that Donald Trump made a couple weeks ago, you have to also realize that ingrained in the American psyche are millions of Donald Trumps. They're just not running for president. To the panelists, how does rape culture influence feminism? And how do we get beyond it? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Well, first, I just want to say that this is an important subject for today's times, but not only for today's times. Feminism affects this because I think as women, we all know a situation where this has happened, and we don't speak about it. So we need to speak about it. For the purposes of this panel, I'll let you all know I graduated from college in 1987. I went to Howard University. And when I was in college, we all knew the guy who was labeled the rapist. Okay, it wasn't funny, but we all said, oh God, there's a rapist. And he came in my room one day, and I just posted this story actually on Twitter because it's not funny, but we trivialize it as women because we know it happens so often. And the story was, hey, remember the time I almost got raped? Why should we even say that? I mean, when I said that to my girlfriends who remember that time, it's horrible. It's horrible to think about that that's how we trivialized it. And so a guy in college, you know, some of you are going there and some of you have been there, but when you're in your dorm room, it was a co-ed dorm, and it wasn't my room, I was in my cousin's room, and he's a guy. And the doors are left open, so everybody leaves their door open when you're not doing anything. So this guy walked by, hey, how's it going? You know, so I'm talking to him, hey, all this, you know, I'm on the bed, because in a college room, you only have a bed, a desk, and a chair. Okay, nowhere to sit. So I'm sitting on the bed, and he's talking. First, he's at the door, and then all of a sudden he comes in. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So let me stand up off the bed, because this is not an invitation for you two to sit on the bed, because there's nowhere to sit. So I stand up. He's like, hey, you know, why are you so jumpy? Let's just sit down and talk. I'm like, no, we can stand up and talk, actually. It's good. Then the next thing I know, he closed the door, and then he jumped on me. And I could fight him off of me, but I had to fight him off of me. I went and stood in the hallway after I opened the door back, and I went and stood there, and I'm just like, oh my God. And I'm standing there, people walking by like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, this fool is still in here, you know, get him out. And so he gets out, and luckily nothing happened, but was that nothing? It really was not nothing, it was something. But at the time I said, oh thank God nothing happened. But that's the something that we're talking about. That's the something that we're talking about that we trivialize. That's the something that Donald Trump's been talking about. Like, yeah, it's okay, I'll grab her, I'll come in the room, I'll shut the door, I'll put my hands all over her. Then I came to find out about 5 years later that he raped 5 women on campus. Wow. And was convicted and in jail and didn't even go to Howard. We all thought he went there. He's walking around all the time. Didn't even go to school there. Everybody knew him because he was always just around, but he was around to look for his next victim. And everybody felt comfortable with him because, oh, there's so-and-so, like we all knew him, but nobody saw him in taking a class or reading a book or anything. So, but we all trivialized it. And I brought that point up to my girlfriend, who I'll see this weekend at Howard, so I'm coming. But I said, you know how we all just talked about it? Like, remember the time I was got raped? Like, why did we say that? It's so horrible. It's so horrible to say, thank God nothing happened, but he did put his hands on me. He shut the door. He was intimidating. He was stalking, you know? And was that ever reported? No. But luckily, to find out that someone did report him, and the person was convicted and was sitting in jail for a couple of years. I think it was 5 years. So, I mean, I just think that we as women have to talk about it and encourage each other to not trivialize it.
Just a really quick statement to this. There's a fantastic and incredibly frightening film called The Hunting Ground. It's a documentary about the silence on campuses around sexual assault. If you have college-age kids or kids going to college, male and female, they need to see it. They need to know how to identify it. And it's this like horrific plague right now that's in the mainstream conversation that's now bringing to light this notion and concept of consent, and what is consent, no, right? I think that rape culture has brought this to the forefront of conversations, and hopefully will save a lot of young girls on campus and young men, because men are also victims of sexual assault. And yeah, I just want to throw that documentary out there, because you got to see it. It's on Netflix.
I wanted to say.
I think we need to take a lesson from Adrienne when she gave her first story about calling out sexism. We need to teach our young men and women, you know, when to call out rape. We just can't have a silent movement on it. That's the only way things are going to change. You have to talk about it. You have to be comfortable talking about it. College campuses now are doing more seminars on rape culture, but it's basically geared towards women on how they dress. Are they drinking a lot? You know, are they alone? So we have to make sure it's a comprehensive, you know, policy that holds males accountable. So they're making progress because they are, you know, shedding light on it, but they're also still showing that the women are usually asking for it through the way they dress. So we need to kind of still work on breaking those barriers.
I agree, and I really want to see hunting ground, and I know that a lot of like colleges were sponsoring events to show it. And I agree, we got to discuss it. I just go back to kind of in college, and I was in a sorority, and, you know, I remember being, you know, the freshmen had to go to this fraternity house and put on like this dance, all the sororities lined up, and you're like wearing basically nothing, and they like wrap this like stuff around my body, and they're like, oh, take some shots, and I'm like, I couldn't do it, you know, like I was like, this is crazy, I'm not a dancer, I don't know what this is. You basically go in, and there were girls, like, it was like dancing on guys, and it's like a strip club. And that is when, the first time I've ever seen that in my life, my freshman year, and I thought you had to go along and do this because that's what everyone did, and it's a culture. And when I became president of my sorority, I said we were no longer doing it. And I think because there were people like me that felt, why are we doing this? It's tradition, it's tradition. And it wasn't. And I think we've got to talk to each other about when we feel uncomfortable about things, so that you're not the only one saying no. Like if you don't feel comfortable with the way the situation, you know, being able to tell your friends or others and say, because I guarantee there are more people that feel that way. And so I think I'm so happy, not happy that Donald Trump's out there, but when he's putting this out there, you've seen more women telling their stories. And they're being called liars and all this crap, but thank God people are standing with them. They're standing with these ladies who are who have very successful jobs and knew that they were going to take a hit in the media by putting themselves out there. And so we've really got to support them and make sure that we're not letting them like slut shame them, and making sure that we are also, you know, tweeting or social media in support of these women to go back on the trolls. And the last thing I'll say, and it doesn't actually do the rape culture, but we held and Amisha was there, we had a women event on Saturday to vote. You know, we had a brunch, breakfast, potluck, people came, women came, we got 400 women to walk down to the polls and vote. And we had these ugly trolls on Twitter retweeting us and saying hateful things to people who are Facebook and social media about why should women vote, they should have the right to take it away, you know, just lies and just terrible things. And so we have to be united also on social media and voices and stand up for each other, because I think that's is what is needed at this time. So
I'm so passionate about this because I think this is a huge example of why feminism is necessary. When we have a presidential candidate who has said that he commits sexual assault, and more than a third of the country is like, no big deal, it's locker room talk.
That's patriarchy right there.
And the reason that is relevant to women of color, I mean, yes, all of the women who have come forward have been white women, but black women are more likely, statistically, more likely to be victims of sexual assault and less likely to be believed. There was research done on college campuses where they gave college students examples of date rape scenarios, and they were less likely to label something date rape if it involved an African American woman. By the same token, 40% of Black women by the time they're 18 have experienced some kind of sexually coercive touch. So, you know, someone grabbing their butt or, you know, touching them, grabbing them in some kind of way. And we're not believed because of the stereotype that we are hypersexual. And that stereotype follows us not just in the mainstream out in white culture, but in our own neighborhoods. Because how many girls, teenage girls, walk to this school every day past grown men who sexualize them and adults that then call them fast because of the way their bodies look. So I think it's really important that we talk about this in our community and the effect that it has on our community, and not spend all of our time teaching women how not to get raped, because that's not a thing. It's teaching men not to rape, period.
And to add to your point, what is at the heart of rape culture? What is really at the heart of rape culture? I mean, I've worked in the criminal justice system for 15 years, and one thing that is consistent with men that are accused of rape is their hatred of women. Their absolute hatred of women. And so one of the things that I've seen just in court, I was actually watching a pro se jury trial. It was in the newspaper. You guys may have read about it. These two brothers that actually were accused of raping a woman on the west side of Chicago. I was listening to their closing statements. They were both convicted, by the way, just let me say that. And I think the reason why they were both convicted was because of one of the brothers' closing arguments. He was talking about the women, and he was talking about, you know, there are really two kinds of women, you know. There are the women, the state's attorneys that dress respectfully, and then there are other women. And yes, this was his argument. And he said this woman, the victim, she was out at 2 o'clock in the morning at the bus stop. What was she doing out there? She was a prostitute. Well, I guess it just never really occurred to him that she was just out on she was at the bus stop at 2 o'clock in the morning, perhaps maybe leaving work. But it was just, he had, in his mind, there were two kinds of women. And there were good women, and there were women that just didn't need to be respected or believed. And when I first started as a prosecutor in reviewing cases and deciding which cases would get charged, which ones wouldn't, I noticed with the rape cases, if it was one-on-one, so say for example, a woman, it was a date rape, she was in there with a guy that she knew, and he had assaulted her, my supervisor would tell me, this is not really a case that we can prove, we need some other evidence. And we need like maybe DNA or a statement. If you don't have that, we're not going to charge it. But if it were the same situation and it were a robbery and it was just a single finger, just, you know, one person, well, this guy said he was robbed and then and he was credible, then we could charge it. I mean, what are the differences between those two facts scenarios? It's just that women, there's a stereotype that women are inherently dishonest. They cannot be trusted to tell the truth with what happens to their bodies. And so that is something, even within the criminal justice system, that we are going to have to work on. And it's something that we also have to work on in society. I mean, we've got Donald Trump, people have mentioned Donald Trump, right? But we've also got Hillary Clinton, right? And she's a phenomenal candidate. But one of the things that I keep hearing people say about her is that she's dishonest. She is dishonest. And that is just something that I see every day in the justice system as to why we can't prosecute rape cases, because all we have is the word of a woman. And who's going to really believe her?
Well, the next portion of this before we move on is hypermasculinity. So we can't talk about rape culture, sexual harassment, all of those issues without talking about the codes of hypermasculinity among men, especially in today's society, because it's gotten a lot worse than it's ever been in history. Part of that we can blame on the media, telling men what it means to be men. And in some cultures, particularly African American, not too many male role models there to overshadow what the media is showing about how men should be and how men should react. So what you end up seeing is males who believe that to be the alpha male, they have to treat women in a certain way. They have to have as many women as they can count on more than two hands. They have to be neglectful. They have to be loud. they have to exude power. And that power can come across in many ways as abusive. That power can come across in many ways, and sometimes not even recognized by the man, as being things and relating to women in a way that they would not relate to their mothers, in a way that they would not relate to their children. I have male friends who have daughters, and the way that they talk about women, you would not assume that they do. They would not train their daughters to react positively to men who speak like they do themselves about women. When you see a culture where that is dissected in such a large way, and men think that it is okay to approach women and catcall women as they're crossing the street, and they think that it is okay to follow women blocks at a time that they don't know, when they think that it is okay to commit violent acts against a woman who says no, a woman who turns them down for a date, and it's real. There are women dying on a daily basis, particularly women of color, Black and Latino, because they simply did not pay attention to that man or take his advances seriously. In fact, in this country, 1 in 3 women of color will die at the hands of a male, and they will die at the hands of that male because they ignored his advances. That is real. These are men that these women don't even know. But because that hypermasculinity in this culture and in this country has gone on for so long, they don't know how to take no for an answer. They don't know how to develop a skin to where, okay, well, I'll just shake it off and keep moving. You're not going to win every woman you want. And it turns into a violent situation. You have women who are afraid to say anything to a man because they don't know how that man's going to react. You have women right here on the south and west sides of Chicago who won't not smile at a man, who won't not greet that man, because the minute she doesn't, he follows her, he curses her out, he exudes a level of force that scares her. And like what was mentioned earlier, if you're a woman of color and you call the police on these things, good luck with them showing up on time, first and foremost, but also with anything actually happening to the guy. Hypermasculinity in this culture has developed in a way that has women fearful of going outside of their homes by themselves. It is developed in a way where mothers are afraid to send their girls off to camps, to different sports, to actually be involved in community initiatives and community organizations because they know they're going to come across situations like this and they don't know how to help them. Where we're talking about the national consciousness around all of these different levels of aggression, around sexual harassment, around how much is too much, and for the majority of men, they don't know when that stopping point is. And sadly, a lot of women also don't know how to react out of fear. Justifiably. Where do we go from there? How do we reach a point where we'll be able to not only teach young men what that stopping point is, but also reverse some of the psyche around hypermasculinity?
Well, I think part of it is letting go of that idea of let a man be a man. There are a lot of really regressive, unhelpful ideas about the roles of men and women, I think sometimes that fester in our communities. And it's not just the thing that has men hollering out at you on the street, but it also comes up in conversations about Black women in marriage, about having to defer to men, about allowing them, well, you know, if you don't give him enough of this, he's going to have to go find someone else because he's a good Black man and he needs to be. It's that whole thinking, that whole idea that men's needs are primary and that Black women's needs cannot, you know, we don't have our own needs and we don't have our own autonomy. And I think it ties our hands. It ties our hands from being able to call out hypermasculinity and being able to call out violence, because then we also have this burden of protecting the community. So how can you call the police on this Black man and send another Black man to jail? How can you talk about hypermasculinity? You're splitting the community apart. So I think part of it is getting rid of this whole alpha male. Again, it is looking at how sexist roles affect us all, including men, and getting rid of those things, because it's not just going to help us, it's going to help you too?
Oh man, there's so much. In my world, we dealt with a lot of machismo, and so the man is the head of the household. My dear father, I love, man, he can be a trip. And I think I married one like my father. So my husband and I battle against this all the time because, you know, my husband's a very strong male, but he's also very supportive.